The world of social media can turn cruel in an instant. One moment, you're scrolling through harmless content, and the next, you're witnessing the public humiliation of a legend. That's exactly what happened when rising social media star and self-proclaimed political commentator Alex Winters decided to target one of Hollywood's most iconic figures. Comment where you're watching from today as we dive into this remarkable story of respect, legacy, and standing up for what's right. It was an ordinary Tuesday when Alex Winters sat in his modern, minimalist apartment in downtown Los Angeles. At just 26 years old, he had amassed over 3 million followers across his social platforms by creating content that appealed to a younger, progressive audience. His videos typically featured sharp critiques of conservative figures, traditional values, and what he referred to as outdated thinking. His viewers praised him for his boldness and willingness to challenge established norms, but many noted his approach often lacked nuance and respect. On this particular morning, Alex noticed that Clint Eastwood was trending after giving a brief interview at a film festival. Despite being in his 90s, Eastwood had continued to work in the industry he loved, directing films and occasionally making public appearances. The interview showed Eastwood speaking slowly but thoughtfully about cinema and his latest project, a reflection on aging and legacy. Alex saw an opportunity. With a smirk, he began pulling clips from the interview, focusing on moments where Eastwood paused to collect his thoughts, or when his hand trembled slightly. He assembled these carefully selected moments into a compilation, interspersed with his own commentary. This is what Hollywood considers a directing genius in 2025? Alex laughed into the camera. I mean, the man can barely string a sentence together. Maybe it's time to let the dinosaurs retire and make room for filmmakers who actually understand today's world. The video continued with Alex mocking Eastwood's deliberate speech patterns and physical appearance. He added animations and sound effects to emphasize these moments, creating a caricature of the legendary director. Between clips, Alex delivered monologues about how Eastwood represented an outdated era of filmmaking, filled with problematic masculinity and conservative fantasies. Let's be honest, Alex said toward the end of the video. The only reason anyone still pretends to care about Eastwood's work is because they're afraid to admit that his time has passed. Half his audience is as old as he is, and the other half is just pretending to appreciate his films because they think it makes them look cultured. It's time we stopped treating these relics like they're relevant and start focusing on voices that actually matter in today's world. Alex ended his video with a call to action, encouraging viewers to name other overrated Hollywood figures who should step aside. Within hours of posting, the video had accumulated hundreds of thousands of views. His regular audience applauded what they saw as a brave takedown of an establishment figure, while others shared it out of shock or outrage. By evening, the hashtag #EastwoodIsOver was trending, with Alex's followers amplifying his message. Media outlets began picking up the story, with headlines questioning whether Alex had gone too far or if he was simply stating what younger generations truly believed. The controversy only served to increase the video's reach, pushing it to millions of views within 24 hours. In comment sections across the internet, heated debates broke out. Younger users often sided with Alex, arguing that Hollywood had a habit of glorifying figures from the past at the expense of new talent. Others expressed disgust at the disrespect shown to a man who had contributed so much to American cinema over a career spanning 7 decades. "This isn't about politics or age," wrote one commenter. "It's about basic human decency and respect for someone's lifetime of work." Another countered, "No one should be immune to criticism just because they're old or famous." If younger filmmakers were given half the opportunities Eastwood had, imagine what they could accomplish. The conversation quickly morphed from a discussion about Eastwood specifically to a broader dialogue about respect, ageism, and the often toxic nature of social media discourse. Old interviews with Eastwood began recirculating, showing his thoughts on perseverance, hard work, and the craft of filmmaking, a stark contrast to the caricature presented in Alex's video. Throughout the growing controversy, Eastwood himself remained silent. No statement was issued, no response given. This was characteristic of the man who had always let his work speak for itself and rarely engaged in public disputes. His silence seemed to emphasize the gap between the thoughtful filmmaker and the chaotic world of social media hot takes. Meanwhile, Alex was riding the wave of attention. He appeared on several podcasts defending his position, arguing that his video was simply calling out the entertainment industry's obsession with the past. When challenged about the mocking tone, he insisted he was using humor to make a valid point about representation and opportunity in Hollywood. "I respect what Eastwood did in his prime," Alex claimed in one interview, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But we need to stop pretending that someone his age still has relevant things to say about today's world. There are filmmakers in their 20s and 30s who understand modern society better than he ever could." As the video continued to spread, it reached beyond entertainment circles. Political commentators began weighing in, either condemning the disrespect shown to a cultural icon or defending Alex's right to criticize powerful figures regardless of their age or status. What had started as a provocative social media post was evolving into a national conversation about generational divides, respect, and the nature of legacy. Behind the scenes, those who had worked with Eastwood over the years were watching with growing concern. Many felt protective of the director, but were hesitant to engage directly with the controversy, knowing it would only fuel the fire. They understood what Alex and his followers didn't. Eastwood had earned his reputation not through privilege or luck, but through decades of consistent innovation, hard work, and artistic integrity. The controversy might have remained just another fleeting social media moment, eventually overshadowed by the next outrage. But fate had other plans, as the video was about to reach someone who had a unique perspective on both respect and standing up for what's right. The algorithm that had pushed Alex's content to millions was about to deliver it to a man who symbolized strength, integrity, and unwavering principle, a man who understood what it meant to build a legacy in Hollywood while staying true to one's convictions, a man named Chuck Norris. As the sun set on the third day of the controversy, Chuck Norris was about to enter the conversation. And when Chuck Norris takes a stand, the world tends to pay attention. Little did Alex know that his viral moment was about to become a lesson in respect that would change not just his career, but his entire perspective on what it means to leave a lasting legacy. Chuck Norris had never been one to spend much time on social media. At his age, he preferred the company of family, friends, and the great outdoors to the digital world that seemed to consume so many. This particular morning found him at a veterans charity event in Texas, where he had been invited as a guest of honor. The sprawling event center was filled with men and women who had served their country, many of whom had grown up watching Chuck's films and television shows. The atmosphere was one of camaraderie and respect, with veterans from different eras sharing stories and supporting one another. Chuck moved through the crowd with genuine interest, listening more than he spoke. Despite his legendary status, he carried himself with the humility that had become his trademark. He stopped for every photo request, shook every hand extended to him, and made each person feel valued, a stark contrast to the viral mockery that was simultaneously unfolding online. During a brief break in the activities, Chuck found himself sitting at a table with a group of Vietnam veterans. These men, now in their 70s, had been following his career since its earliest days. They had seen him transition from martial arts champion to action star to cultural icon, all while maintaining the integrity and values that resonated with so many Americans. "Chuck, have you seen what they're saying about Eastwood?" one of the veterans asked, holding up his phone. "Some kid with a big following is tearing him apart online. It's getting nasty." Chuck's expression remained measured, but his eyes reflected concern. He had known Clint Eastwood for decades. While they had taken different paths in Hollywood and didn't always see eye to eye politically, there was a mutual respect between them that transcended any differences. Both men understood what it meant to forge a path in an unforgiving industry while staying true to one's principles. "Let me see," Chuck said, taking the offered phone. As he watched the video, the veterans observed a subtle change in Chuck's demeanor. Though he remained outwardly calm, those who knew him well could sense his growing disapproval. The mocking tone, the deliberately unflattering editing, the dismissal of a lifetime of achievement. It struck Chuck as not just disrespectful, but fundamentally unjust. "This young man doesn't understand what he's talking about," Chuck said finally, handing the phone back. His voice was as steady as ever, but there was a certainty to it that made everyone at the table pay attention. "Clint Eastwood has forgotten more about filmmaking than this kid will ever know." Another veteran nodded in agreement. It's not just about Eastwood, though, is it? It's about respect, about understanding that getting older doesn't make you irrelevant. Exactly, Chuck replied, and about recognizing the contributions people have made, even if you don't agree with everything they stand for. As the conversation continued, more veterans joined in, sharing their thoughts on the changing nature of public discourse and the seemingly diminishing value placed on experience and wisdom. Chuck listened thoughtfully, memories of his own journey in Hollywood playing in his mind. He remembered his early days in the industry, when he was still finding his footing as an actor. Eastwood had already been established then, having transitioned from television to film and beginning to make his mark as a director. Though they had never collaborated directly, their paths had crossed at industry events over the years. One particular memory stood out, a brief conversation at an award ceremony in the late 1980s. Eastwood had just received recognition for his directorial work, and Chuck had congratulated him. "The trick," Eastwood had told him, "is to keep challenging yourself. Don't let them put you in a box, and always remember why you started in the first place." That advice had stayed with Chuck throughout his career. As he sat among the veterans now, he reflected on how both he and Eastwood had managed to evolve over the decades while remaining true to their core values. Neither man had ever sought approval or adjusted their beliefs to match changing trends. They had stood firm, even when it wasn't popular to do so. "You know," one of the younger veterans at the table said, breaking into Chuck's thoughts, "my kids watch these influencers. They believe what they hear. If no one stands up to correct this kind of disrespect, they'll think it's acceptable." Chuck nodded slowly. "You're right. Someone should say something." By the time the charity event concluded in the late afternoon, the video had been shown to Chuck several times by different people. Each viewing only strengthened his resolve. This wasn't merely about defending a colleague, it was about standing for principles that seemed increasingly rare in modern discourse: respect, integrity, and the recognition that wisdom often comes with age and experience. On the drive home, Chuck made his decision. He wasn't particularly tech-savvy, but he knew how to use the platforms where his voice could make a difference. He would address the situation, not with anger or by attacking the young influencer, but by speaking truth as he saw it. As he pulled into his driveway, Chuck's phone rang. It was an old friend from his Hollywood days, someone who had worked with both him and Eastwood over the years. "I assume you've seen the video about Clint," the friend said without preamble. "I have," Chuck confirmed, "planning to do something about it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Clint wouldn't ask for anyone to defend him, you know, not his style. Chuck smiled slightly. "I know, that's exactly why someone should." After ending the call, Chuck sat in his car for a moment longer. He thought about all the changes he had witnessed throughout his career: the evolution of the entertainment industry, the rise of the internet, the shifting cultural landscape. Through it all, certain values had remained constant for him: treating others with dignity, standing up for what was right, and respecting those who had earned their place through hard work and dedication. Clint Eastwood embodied those values, regardless of any political differences they might have. And in an age where experience was often dismissed in favor of novelty, where wisdom was frequently overlooked in the pursuit of trends, someone needed to speak up. With renewed purpose, Chuck entered his home and headed to his office. Tomorrow, he would craft a response that would not only defend Eastwood, but also serve as a reminder of what truly matters in a world that sometimes seemed to have lost its way. The martial arts legend was about to enter a different kind of arena, one where the weapons were words, and the prize was the preservation of respect and dignity. Little did Alex Winters know that his viral video was about to receive a response from a man whose quiet strength and unwavering principles had made him a legend, both on and off the screen. Chuck Norris was stepping into the digital ring, and he was bringing decades of hard-earned wisdom with him. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Chuck Norris's home office as he sat at his desk, gathering his thoughts. A cup of black coffee steamed beside him, untouched. For nearly an hour, he had been reviewing Clint Eastwood's career, not just the iconic roles that had made him a household name, but the groundbreaking work as a director, his contribution to preserving film history, and his unwavering commitment to storytelling that challenged audiences. Chuck was not a man who acted impulsively. His martial arts training had instilled in him the value of discipline, of measured responses rather than reactive ones. He understood that the most powerful statement would not be an angry rebuttal, but a thoughtful defense of a legacy that deserved respect, regardless of political affiliation or generational differences. After careful consideration, Chuck positioned his camera and pressed record. Unlike Alex's video, there would be no flashy editing, no mocking tone, no attempt to belittle. Just a man speaking honestly about another man's contributions to an art form they both loved. "Good morning," Chuck began, his voice steady and authoritative. "Many of you know me from my films or from Walker, Texas Ranger. Today, I'm not here as an actor, but as someone who has spent over 5 decades in the entertainment industry. I want to talk about respect, legacy, and the importance of understanding history before dismissing it." He paused briefly, his eyes reflecting a mixture of conviction and contemplation. Recently, a video has been circulating that mocks Clint Eastwood for his age and questions his relevance in today's world. I've known Clint for many years, and while we don't always see eye to eye on everything, there are some truths that transcend political differences or personal opinions. Chuck proceeded to outline Eastwood's journey from television actor to international film star to acclaimed director. He spoke of Eastwood's willingness to take creative risks, to tackle complex themes, and to constantly reinvent himself in an industry that often preferred safe formulas over artistic challenges. When Clint directed Unforgiven in 1992, he wasn't just making a Western, he was deconstructing an entire genre that had defined American cinema for generations. He was asking hard questions about violence, redemption, and the myths we tell ourselves. That film won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. Chuck continued, citing film after film, achievement after achievement. He spoke of Million Dollar Baby, Letters from Iwo Jima, Gran Torino, and countless others, explaining how each represented not just entertainment, but important cultural contributions that had expanded the boundaries of American filmmaking. What some see as old-fashioned in Clint's work, Chuck noted, others recognize as timeless. The themes he explores, personal responsibility, the complex nature of heroism, the cost of violence, the search for redemption, these aren't outdated concepts. They're fundamental human concerns that each generation must grapple with in its own way. As he spoke, Chuck's demeanor remained composed, his words measured but powerful. There was no anger in his voice, only conviction and the quiet authority that had made him a respected figure both on and off screen. "When you mock someone for their age," he continued, "you're not just disrespecting an individual, you're dismissing the value of experience, of wisdom earned through decades of trial and error, of lessons learned that can only come with time. And you're setting a dangerous precedent for how you yourself might be treated when you're no longer considered young or relevant by whatever arbitrary standards exist in the future." Chuck then addressed the broader implications of the viral video, framing it not as an isolated incident, but as symptomatic of a culture that often valued novelty over substance and immediate impact over lasting significance. This isn't about politics. It isn't about conservative versus liberal values. It's about recognizing that greatness doesn't expire, that contributions don't become irrelevant just because the person who made them has grown older. It's about understanding that the bridges we cross today were built by those who came before us, whether we acknowledge their work or not. He leaned slightly forward, his gaze direct and unflinching. "To the young creator who made this video, I'm not angry with you. I don't think you're a bad person. I believe you're passionate about your views and about creating content that resonates with your audience. But I do think you've missed an opportunity to engage with a legacy that deserves more than mockery. I think you've chosen an easy target rather than challenging yourself to understand the complexities of a career that spans 7 decades. Chuck's expression softened slightly, taking on an almost paternal quality. "I hope that when you reach your later years, you'll be treated with more respect than you've shown to Clint. I hope your work will be evaluated on its merits, rather than dismissed because of your age. And I hope you'll take this moment not as an attack, but as an invitation to look deeper, to learn more, and to consider the value of what came before you." As he concluded, Chuck offered a final thought that encapsulated the essence of his message. "In martial arts, we're taught to honor those who develop the traditions we practice. to respect the masters who refine the techniques we use. The same principle applies in any field, including filmmaking. True strength isn't shown by tearing others down. It's demonstrated by acknowledging their contributions while adding your own chapter to the ongoing story. With that, Chuck ended his recording. No call for the video to be taken down, no demand for an apology, no attempt to shame or humiliate the young influencer. Just a reasoned, respectful defense of a legacy that had shaped American cinema and influenced countless filmmakers around the world. Within minutes of posting, Chuck's response began to spread across social media platforms. Unlike the original video, which had gained attention through shock value and controversy, Chuck's message resonated because of its sincerity, its thoughtfulness, and its refusal to stoop to the level of personal attacks. As views multiplied and shares increased, comment sections filled with reactions from people across the political spectrum. Many expressed appreciation for Chuck's measured tone and substantive arguments. Others shared their own stories of how Eastwood's films had affected them, revealing the true reach and impact of the director's work. By nightfall, Chuck's video had surpassed the original in views, shares, and engagement. What had begun as a viral mockery had transformed into a meaningful conversation about respect, legacy, and the value of experience. And somewhere in Los Angeles, a young influencer named Alex Winters was watching, his certainty beginning to give way to doubt as he faced not anger or hatred, but something far more powerful: wisdom delivered with respect and integrity. The response had been made. Now the world was watching to see what would happen next. By the following morning, Chuck Norris's response had transformed from a viral video into a cultural moment. Major news networks were featuring segments about the exchange, entertainment publications were publishing analyses, and social media platforms were flooded with discussions about respect, ageism, and the value of experience versus youth in creative industries. For Alex Winters, the aftermath was immediate and overwhelming. The young influencer awoke to find his phone overloaded with notifications, some from supporters defending his right to criticize, but many more expressing disappointment, calling for accountability, or sharing Chuck's video as a counterpoint. Several brands that had previously partnered with Alex for sponsored content were quietly pulling back, concerned about the potential backlash of being associated with someone now being cast as disrespectful to Hollywood legends. Alex's first instinct was to double down. In a hastily recorded follow-up video, he defended his original take, framing Chuck's response as proof that the old guard sticks together and suggesting that criticism of his video was merely resistance to changing cultural values. He reiterated his point that the film industry needed to make room for younger voices and perspectives, insisting that his criticism of Eastwood was part of a broader conversation about representation in Hollywood. "I stand by what I said," Alex declared, though his usual confidence seemed slightly diminished. Respecting someone's past contributions doesn't mean they should be immune to criticism or that they deserve continued influence. Times change, perspectives evolve, and sometimes legends need to step aside so new voices can be heard. But as the day progressed, Alex couldn't help but notice that his follow-up was receiving a different kind of attention than his content usually attracted. Even many of his loyal followers were commenting that Chuck's response had been fair and respectful, in contrast to the mocking tone of Alex's original video. Some suggested that he had missed an opportunity to engage in a meaningful dialogue about generational differences in filmmaking rather than resorting to ridicule. Meanwhile, other celebrities and industry figures were beginning to weigh in. Filmmakers who had worked with Eastwood shared stories of his mentorship and his continued commitment to innovation, even in his later years. Younger directors spoke of how his techniques had influenced their own work, crediting him with helping to shape their artistic vision despite the generational gap. One particularly powerful statement came from an acclaimed female director in her 30s who had worked as an assistant on one of Eastwood's recent films. In a thoughtful post, she described how Eastwood had encouraged her to trust her instincts and develop her own voice, never once dismissing her ideas because of her age or relative inexperience. The narrative that Clint Eastwood represents some outdated, exclusionary vision of filmmaking is simply false, she wrote. He's championed diverse voices throughout his later career and continues to push boundaries in an industry that often prefers safe commercial choices. Criticism is valuable, but it should be based on facts and actual work, not caricatures. As more industry insiders added their perspectives, a more nuanced picture of Eastwood emerged, not as a perfect figure beyond criticism, but as a complex artist whose contributions deserved more thoughtful engagement than Alex's video had offered. Historical context was provided for some of Eastwood's more controversial moments, and his artistic evolution over 7 decades was examined with greater depth and care. By midday, several of Alex's influencer colleagues were privately messaging him, suggesting that he might want to reconsider his position. Not because Chuck Norris was powerful or because the backlash was intense, but because there seemed to be substantive aspects of Eastwood's career that Alex had overlooked or misrepresented in his rush to create provocative content. Throughout this growing storm, Clint Eastwood himself remained characteristically silent. No statement was issued, no comment made. His publicist responded to media inquiries with a simple, "Mr. Eastwood is currently focused on his next project and has no comment on recent social media discussions." This dignified restraint only seemed to emphasize the contrast between the noise of the controversy and the quiet integrity of the man at its center. As evening approached, Alex found himself sitting alone in his apartment, scrolling through the seemingly endless commentary about the situation. For the first time since the controversy began, doubt began to creep into his mind. Had he chosen an easy target? Had he sacrificed fairness for views? Had he, in his eagerness to speak for his generation, failed to do the basic research that any responsible commentator should undertake? These questions became more pressing when his agent called, voice tight with concern. "We need to talk about damage control," she said without preamble. "This isn't just about one video anymore. It's affecting how people see you as a creator and commentator. No one wants to work with someone who's perceived as disrespectful to legends, especially when those legends have fans across multiple generations." As Alex listened to his agent outline the potential long-term consequences for his career, the reality of the situation began to sink in. What had seemed like a clever, provocative take now looked increasingly like a miscalculation, not just professionally, but ethically. He had made assumptions about Eastwood based on age and political perception, rather than engaging with the actual body of work or the man's ongoing influence. After ending the call, Alex sat in silence for several minutes, then began something he should have done before creating the original video. He started researching Clint Eastwood's career in earnest, not cherry-picking moments to mock, but genuinely trying to understand the scope and significance of the filmmaker's contribution to American cinema. Hour after hour, Alex dove deeper into Eastwood's filmography, reading critical analyses, watching interviews with collaborators, and examining the evolution of themes and techniques across decades of work. What he found challenged many of his assumptions. Eastwood's films weren't simple expressions of conservative values or outdated masculinity. They were often complex explorations of moral ambiguity, the consequences of violence, and the struggle for redemption. Many directly questioned the very myths of American identity that Alex had assumed Eastwood uncritically celebrated. By midnight, Alex had gained a new perspective, not just on Eastwood, but on his own approach to commentary. He realized that in his pursuit of views and validation, he had embraced a form of discourse that valued clever takedowns over substantive engagement, that prioritized immediate impact over deeper understanding. Meanwhile, across town, a reporter managed to catch Chuck Norris as he was leaving a restaurant. "Any further thoughts on the situation with Alex Winters?" the reporter asked. Chuck paused, considering his response carefully. "I said what I needed to say in my video," he replied. "This isn't about attacking a young man for having an opinion. It's about encouraging all of us to look beyond surface perceptions and easy narratives. I hope something positive comes from this conversation, not just about Clint, but about how we treat each other across generational lines." As Chuck's measured response made its way online, adding yet another dimension to the ongoing discussion, Alex Winters was coming to a difficult but necessary conclusion. He had been wrong. Not just factually wrong about aspects of Eastwood's career, but wrong in his approach, wrong in his assumptions, and wrong in using mockery where critical engagement would have been more appropriate. The question now was what to do about it, and whether a genuine acknowledgement of error could transform this controversy from a career setback into an opportunity for growth and redemption. As dawn approached, Alex made his decision. The aftermath wasn't over yet, but it was about to take an unexpected turn. The decision to publicly acknowledge a mistake is never easy, especially when you've built a brand on confidence and unwavering opinions. For Alex Winters, the journey from mockery to understanding had been unexpectedly profound, forcing him to confront not just the facts about Clint Eastwood's career, but also uncomfortable truths about his own approach to content creation. After a restless night of reflection, Alex sat down at his desk the following morning and began writing. Not a script for a video filled with quips and clever edits, but a thoughtful statement addressing the controversy and what he had learned from it. He worked through draft after draft, struggling to find the right balance between acknowledging his error and maintaining his authentic voice. Finally, after several hours, he had something that felt honest. Not perfect, not calculated for maximum engagement, but truthful in a way his content rarely was. He set up his camera, took a deep breath, and pressed record. "I made a mistake," Alex began, his usual energetic delivery replaced by a more measured tone. "Not just a factual error, but a fundamental one in how I approached my video about Clint Eastwood. I prioritized mockery over understanding. I chose the easy path of ridicule, rather than doing the work of engaging with a complex legacy." Alex explained how he had spent the past 24 hours genuinely researching Eastwood's career, discovering aspects of the filmmaker's work that challenged his preconceptions. He acknowledged that while criticism of any artist remained valid and necessary, such criticism needed to be informed, substantive, and respectful of the full context of a person's contributions. "What I found wasn't a relic clinging to relevance, but an artist who has consistently challenged himself and his audience throughout a remarkable career," Alex continued. "I found a director who has tackled difficult subjects with nuance, who has evolved his perspective over time, and who has often used his platform to question the very myths that I wrongly assumed he celebrated." Alex was careful not to swing to the opposite extreme of uncritical praise. He noted that legitimate critiques of Eastwood's work and perspective certainly existed and deserved to be part of the conversation. The issue wasn't criticism itself, but the dismissive, ageist, and superficial nature of his original approach. "To Chuck Norris, I want to say thank you," Alex said toward the end of his video. "Not for calling me out, but for doing so with a respect I failed to show. You could have responded with the same mockery I used, but you chose a better path. That's a lesson I won't forget." He concluded with a commitment to his audience. He would continue to offer perspectives that challenged the status quo, but he would do so with greater care, deeper research, and a respect for the complexities of creative legacies, regardless of his personal or political differences with the creators in question. After posting the video, titled simply, "I Was Wrong," Alex stepped away from his phone and computer. He had no interest in watching the numbers climb or reading the immediate reactions. For perhaps the first time in his social media career, he was more concerned with the integrity of his message than its performance metrics. The response, when he finally checked hours later, was mixed, but largely positive. Many expressed surprise at his willingness to publicly acknowledge error in an online landscape where doubling down was the norm. Others remained skeptical, questioning whether this was a genuine change of heart or merely strategic damage control. But even among the skeptics, there was a recognition that his apology video showed a depth and thoughtfulness absent from much of his previous content. What Alex couldn't have anticipated was that his video would reach Chuck Norris, who was preparing for a private event honoring veterans of the film industry, both those who had served in the military and those who had dedicated their lives to preserving and advancing the art of cinema. The event, organized through Chuck's foundation, was designed to bridge generational gaps in the industry, bringing together established figures and emerging talents for an evening of conversation and mutual appreciation. After watching Alex's apology, Chuck made an unexpected decision. He instructed his assistant to extend an invitation to the young influencer, offering him an opportunity to meet some of the very legends whose relevance he had questioned, not as punishment, but as a chance for genuine connection and understanding. When the invitation arrived in Alex's inbox, his first instinct was to decline out of embarrassment. The thought of facing not just Chuck Norris, but potentially Clint Eastwood himself, after what had transpired, was daunting. But after consulting with his agent, who emphasized the rare opportunity this represented, Alex hesitantly accepted. The evening of the event arrived with Alex feeling distinctly out of place among the industry veterans and established professionals who filled the elegantly appointed ballroom. He stood awkwardly near the entrance, nursing a glass of water and considering a discreet exit when Chuck Norris himself approached. "I'm glad you could make it," Chuck said, extending his hand. His grip was firm but not performatively strong, the handshake of a man with nothing to prove. "I almost didn't," Alex admitted. "After everything that happened?" "That's exactly why you should be here," Chuck replied. "This event isn't about agreeing on everything or pretending differences don't exist. It's about recognizing that we're all part of the same continuing story of filmmaking and storytelling. The veterans here, both military and industry, understand something important about legacy and respect." As Chuck led him further into the gathering, introducing him to directors, actors, and technicians whose careers spanned decades, Alex found himself engaged in conversations that challenged and expanded his perspective. These weren't outdated relics, but vibrant creative minds with nuanced views on film, politics, and the changing media landscape. Midway through the evening, a subtle shift in the room's energy signaled a new arrival. Without any announcement or fanfare, Clint Eastwood had entered. At his advanced age, he moved more slowly than in his prime, but his presence remained commanding, a lifetime of purpose visible in his bearing and clear-eyed gaze. Alex felt his heart rate increase as Chuck began guiding him toward Eastwood. This was the moment he had been both anticipating and dreading. What could he possibly say to a man he had so recently and publicly mocked? "Clint," Chuck said as they approached, "there's someone I'd like you to meet." Eastwood turned, his expression inscrutable, as Chuck made the introduction. "This is Alex Winters. He's got a significant following online. Been creating quite a conversation about cinema lately." If Eastwood recognized Alex from the controversy, he gave no indication. He simply nodded and extended his hand. "Good to meet you. Always interested in hearing new perspectives on film." The conversation that followed was brief but profound. Eastwood didn't lecture or chastise. Instead, he asked questions about Alex's background, his interest in cinema, and his thoughts on storytelling in the digital age. He listened more than he spoke, offering occasional insights from his own experience, but never imposing them as definitive. Before moving on to greet other guests, Eastwood left Alex with a single piece of advice. "The camera doesn't know how old you are. It only knows if you're telling the truth." That simple statement, delivered without pretension or self-importance, crystallized everything Alex had been learning through this experience. Authenticity and honesty transcended age, politics, and platform. They were the foundation of meaningful communication, whether through traditional cinema or digital content. As the evening concluded, Alex found himself speaking again with Chuck Norris. "I want to thank you," he said, "not just for the invitation, but for how you handled everything. You could have destroyed me online, but you chose to respond with dignity." Chuck smiled slightly. "That's not my style. Never saw much point in tearing people down when there's an opportunity to build understanding instead. Besides, we need young voices like yours. We just need those voices to be informed, respectful, and open to dialogue." The event marked not an end, but a beginning. The start of Alex's evolution as a commentator and content creator. In the months that followed, his platform continued to grow, but with a noticeable shift in approach. He still offered critique and commentary from a progressive perspective, but now with greater depth, nuance, and respect for the complexities of creative legacies. The viral controversy faded, as such things inevitably do in the constant churn of online discourse. But the lessons remained, not just for Alex, but for those who had followed the exchange. It had become, in its own modest way, a case study in how disagreement could be navigated with dignity, how critique could be offered with respect, and how bridges could be built across generational and ideological divides. And somewhere in the quieter corners of social media, clips from the entire episode, from Alex's original mockery to Chuck's measured response to the eventual reconciliation, continued to circulate, reminding viewers that in a culture often defined by division and dismissal, there remained the possibility of growth, understanding, and mutual respect. A lesson in something more powerful than viral fame, the enduring value of dignity and the courage to change one's mind.